Now that we've had a chance to get our group organized and ready for the presentation, it's time to introduce some best practices. These first presentations can really be a big change from what we're used to when we're accustomed to being able to take in that 3-ring binder full of our spreadsheets. And really, the idea now of presentation best practices is to incorporate both the dashboard and the reports in a way that presents a meaningful discussion and leads to a renewal decision. Now, these best practices have really been identified by observing hundreds of successful Dynamis presentations and really focusing on the order that they walk through their scenarios and really identifying those steps that those successful presentations had in common. So the key is that we can take these concepts and apply them to any group. So while the details of the options and the plan groups change from renewal to renewal for different employers, the concept of how we walk through our plan groups and lead to a renewal decision are concepts that we can apply to groups going forward. So as we go forward and continue to incorporate in these best practices, when we get together to prepare for specific presentations you have, we'll always be referring back to these best practices as kind of the roadmap to that successful presentation. Now, we said that really what this is managing when we want to use reports and when we want to use the dashboard. So the reports are an important piece of communicating information we have built out in the dashboard. So if we take a look at our presentation best practices, you'll see the first step really starts with a report, what we call our coverage period overview report. So the coverage period overview report is going to give us a snapshot of everything we have built out and really present a high-level financial overview of all the plan groups that we have built. It really does a great job in terms of setting up the expectation as to what we're specifically going to be covering in our presentation, and also introduces the employer to how we're able to look at information in Dynamis. So once we've used the coverage period overview report to really set up the conversation, then it's time to come into the dashboard and walk through their current and renewal plan groups. So when we get to the dashboard for the first time, they'll have a context as to what they're looking at because of the fact that we've already prepared them through the overview report. Then when we get to the dashboard, it's going to be very important to be able to really introduce them to how to look at plan designs and plan groups. And we start off by doing that with their current plan groups. In the familiar environment of their current plans is a great place to really coach them on the key financial indicators we're going to be looking at and really what the numbers mean in the dashboard. So once we've taken our time to really introduce them to the dashboard in the familiar environment of their current plans, then it's time to go to the next plan group, which is going to be the renewal. And we're going to walk them through the renewal plan group. So now that we've been in the dashboard for current and renewal, it's going to be time then to introduce the ways we can compare information that we have built out. And we really do that using two different reports, the plan group comparison and the plan design comparison, depending on whether we want to look at the whole group or set of plans, or if we're really focused in on just looking at specific plan designs. So once they understand how to look at information in our comparisons, then it's really a matter of using the dashboard to introduce the new plan group and then relying on those reports when we need to be able to compare things. And that's really a new use of reports that we probably didn't see when we were going in with our spreadsheet exhibits and working off of paper. While reports are definitely effective in being able to provide those PDF deliverables a lot of times after the meeting to reinforce what we decided, it's also very powerful to be able to align specific comparisons based on the conversation we're having at that moment. So being able to use the dashboard to introduce our groups and being able to use the reports to be able to compare things against each other, that's really the roadmap for the rest of that presentation. Now we want to remember that we're going to be able to look at other scenarios based on what the employer wants to see, whether it's different contribution, different budget, whether it's different funding or HRA configurations. And a best practice when we get to that point where we want to start looking at variations is going to be to remember to copy that plan group and rename it and make our variation there, so that we're not going in and changing the group that we've already built and making changes there. Every time we change, we update, we lose the previous iteration. So by creating a copy to show a variation, we maintain that original scenario that we can compare against. And then, as we mentioned before, as a part of the presentation, we're going to want to hide groups that we eliminate from consideration along the way as we work towards that goal of having that one final selected plan group. So that really sets the stage in terms of that step-by-step roadmap between dashboard and reports that we're going to rely on, especially in the beginning while we're getting comfortable. Again, it's going to be the coverage period overview report to set up the conversation, then go to the dashboard, spend time in current getting them used to how to look at their plan designs in Dynamis. Once they have an understanding of how to look at things in the dashboard, we can move on and look at the renewal. Then when we need to be comparing things like current versus renewal, we're going to go to our either plan group comparison or plan design comparisons. And as we go through, we're going to introduce proposed options in the dashboard, again, relying on those comparison reports when we need to see things arranged side by side. All right, so these best practices, again, will apply to groups without regard to how many proposed options they have, how many employees they have, how many plans they have. It's not the details that matter in terms of the concepts. It's the approach of using the dashboard, supplementing that with our reports to really lead to that effective presentation. Now in the next tutorial, we're going to dive into our sample employer and apply these best practices to give you a feel on how we can apply these concepts to really lead to an effective presentation.